Before a producer hits record or before a journalist picks up a pen, someone like you notices something and wants to understand it. Every day, we invite you to keep asking questions like why and who and how. Because NPR begins with questions, not conclusions, and your right to curiosity is a right worth protecting.
Today is the birthday of infamous murderer and grave robber Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield.
Gein admitted to digging up 9 to 11 bodies, most from this Plainfield cemetery. But to this day, no one is sure how many graves may actually be empty.
And while I'm not celebrating his birthday, I am using it as an excuse to convince my Midday Movie partners to discuss serial killer films and streaming shows. Welcome back to listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie. I'm Beth Accomando. Serial killers have always been amongst us, even if we didn't have a name for them. In movies, Fritz Lang's 1931 film M, starring Peter Lorre, is often recognized as the first feature film to really explore a serial killer as a central character. And it was inspired by a real-life killer known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf. But we'd have to wait until 1960 for Peeping Tom in England and Psycho in the US to launch the modern cinematic obsession with serial killers and its grindhouse offspring, the slasher film. I need to take one quick break and then I'll be back to discuss serial killers with my slightly reluctant colleagues Jade Hindman and Yazdi Pathavala.
Watch programs on your schedule with the KPBS Plus streaming service. See new episodes of Nature and Nova, latest news from PBS NewsHour and KPBS Evening Edition, local shows like Ken Kramer's About San Diego. Learn more at kpbs.org/KPBS Plus.
Welcome back to Cinema Junkie presents Midday Movies and Serial Killers. So, are you ready to go someplace dark?
The only way I could have those girls was to kill them, and it worked. They became my spirit wives. They're still with me. Funny thing, in the ICU, there's no system to alert the guards. It's short-sighted. Seeing what kind of people come through. I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up. Then you'd be with me in spirit.
Okay, y'all, so Beth, I'm going to try to hang with you on this one. Give us a little background on how we define what a serial killer is.
Sure. So using the FBI definition, it's an individual who murders 3 or more people with the killings taking place over a period of more than 1 month in 3 or more separate events. So someone who murders multiple people in a short space of time is referred to as a spree killer, or somebody who murders a large number of people all at once would be a mass murderer. So that's kind of the differentiation through what the FBI says. And the term serial killer comes up in Germany back in 1930 and in the U.S. as early as 1960. But it really entered kind of the pop culture zeitgeist and, media attention and public consciousness after FBI Special Agent Robert Ressler popularized it in 1974. And that whole thing is recounted in the show Mindhunter, which we will be addressing a little bit later. Essentially, serial killers have existed all through time, long before this term came up. Most notably, there was someone, Gilles de Rais, in 15th century France. Of course, famously, Elizabeth Bathory in 16th century Hungary, who was supposed to have bathed in the blood of virgins. Jack the Ripper in the 19th century in England, who was never caught. And in the U.S., the first sort of recognized serial killer was H.H. Holmes in the 19th century. But they just weren't labeled serial killers at that time.
We have you to thank and blame for this topic of terrible people. So why did you want to discuss serial killers? What's wrong with you, Beth?
I am so fascinated with them. So when I was a little kid, my dad had a 26-volume crime encyclopedia that was behind his desk. And I used to sit there and read those things cover to cover because I felt like if I could look at the darkest part of humanity, the scariest thing that there is out there, and try to understand it, maybe that could be helpful. Maybe I could learn to avoid it or combat it in a better way. So that is something that has always sort of been, I feel like, always been in my DNA. In fact, this year, this 12-hour horror marathon I do, Secret Morgue, is themed to serial killers and slashers. So all this has been on my mind for the past few months. And since we started by talking about Ed Gein, technically he's not a serial killer because he was only convicted of killing 2 people. But the thing that kind of grabbed everyone's attention and made him such a horrific image for a lot of people is he robbed graves and then ended up making furniture out of human remains and a suit and I think gloves and a mask out of human flesh. And this was in the late 1950s in a small town. So, we're a little jaded now, but imagine how shocking that would have been in the late 1950s. And just as the murders were coming to light, author Robert Bloch, who lived a mere 35 miles away from Ed Gein, was finishing his book Psycho about a serial killer. Now, Bloch has denied that Gein's case had any influence on his character of Norman Bates. But once Alfred Hitchcock turned the book into a film in 1960, people couldn't help seeing a connection between the fictional serial killer and the real one, especially in terms of the unnaturally close relationship between the men and their mothers. So the film does a good job of depicting a certain kind of serial killer personality. It falters a little bit at the very end where it tries to give a very clinical explanation of Norman's mental state. But here in this early scene between Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates and Martin Balsam as a private investigator, we see this character who is kind of a beta male, someone who's a loser, someone who's been dominated by his mother, but he's trying to act like he's a lot smarter and more in control than he actually is. So here's a scene from Psycho from 1960.
Is anyone at home?
No.
Oh, there's somebody sitting up in the window.
No, there isn't.
Oh, sure, go ahead, take a look.
Oh, that must be my mother. She's an invalid. It's practically like living alone.
Oh, I see. Now, if this girl, Marion Crane, were here, you wouldn't be hiding her, would you?
No.
Not if she paid you well?
No.
Let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that she wanted you to gallantly protect her. You'd know that you were being used, that you wouldn't be made a fool of, would you?
But I'm not a fool.
Well,
and I'm not capable of being fooled, not even by a woman.
Well, this is not a slur on your manhood. I'm sorry.
Let's put it this way. She might have fooled me, but she didn't fool my mother.
Well, then your mother met her. Could I talk to your mother?
No, as I told you, she's confined.
Yes, but just for a few minutes, that's all. There might be some hint that you missed out on. Sick old women are usually pretty sharp. Can I just...
Mr. Arbogast,
I wouldn't disturb her.
I think I've talked to you all I want to.
Yes, but
I think it'd be much better if you left now. Thanks.
Anthony Perkins is great in this. So Ed Gein is also the inspiration for Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, as well as the Buffalo Bill character in Silence of the Lambs.
Well, Yazdi, that brings us to one of the serial killer films you appreciate, which is Silence of the Lambs. Quite the film there.
Yes. Silence of the Lambs has the unique distinction of being the first and actually the only horror film to date to win the Best Film Oscar. And like Mindhunter, which we'll be talking about in just a second, most of the film is a procedural to track down the fictional serial killer Buffalo Bill, who was inspired by Gein and Ted Bundy. And of course, Jodie Foster very famously plays the rookie FBI officer who becomes kind of obsessed in her pursuit of Buffalo Bill. And she seeks out this very enigmatic serial killer, Hannibal Lecter, played indelibly by Anthony Hopkins. Hannibal Lecter is in captivity and she wants to understand the person she's trying to capture through tapping into the mind of Hannibal Lecter. And here's one of the famous scenes between them.
Perhaps you'd care to lend us your view on this questionnaire, sir.
Oh, no. You were doing fine. You had been courteous and receptive to courtesy. You had established trust with the embarrassing truth about Miggs. And now this ham-handed segue into your questionnaire. It won't do.
I'm only asking you to look at this, Doctor. Either you will or you won't.
Yeah. Jack Crawford must be very busy indeed if he is recruiting help from the student body. Busy hunting that new one, Buffalo Bill. What a naughty boy he is. Do you know why he's called Buffalo Bill? Please tell me. The newspapers won't say.
Well, it started as a bad joke in Kansas City homicide. They said, this one likes to skin his humps.
Why do you think he removes their skins, Agent Starling? Throw me with your acumen.
It excites him. Most serial killers keep some sort of trophies from their victims.
I didn't.
No. No, you ate yours.
The film, of course, is canon now for 100 things it does right. The expert editing, the use of layered storytelling, the emotional undertow that drives the lead, and a villain in Hopkins who remains unmatched. But I think there is one thing about the film that is not celebrated enough, in my opinion, and that is the direction of the late Jonathan Demme. This is the same filmmaker who made the ahead of its time Something Wild, the zany Married to the Mob, the bruising Philadelphia, and the entirely underrated Rachel Getting Married, which in my opinion has the best Anne Hathaway performance to date, which says a lot. But the fact that he also pulled out of his pocket one of the most claustrophobic and chilling horror films of all time speaks to his versatility.
When I hear you all talk about these movies, like Beth, you were talking about how you kind of put yourself in the position of someone who might have been targeted by a serial killer. Mm-hmm. What would you do? I mean, I think that's a natural reaction. I do the same thing. Also, the sort of dissecting the mind of a serial killer and what went wrong there? What is their thinking? That's also something that makes these movies, I think, so fascinating. You, Beth, have another film that features the fictional serial killer Hannibal Lecter.
Yes, I do. So back in 1986, which was 5 years before Silence of the Lambs, Michael Mann adapted another Thomas Harris book. This one was Red Dragon, and it features Hannibal Lecter again, and this time played in a much less flamboyant but equally chilling style by Brian Cox. And this film was called Manhunter, and again, an FBI agent, this time played by William Peterson, and he wants to pick the brain of imprisoned serial killer Hannibal Lecter, this time to catch another serial killer who is dubbed the Tooth Fairy. And here's a scene between the FBI agent and Lecter.
I want you to help me, Dr. Lecter.
Yes. I thought so.
It's about Atlanta and Birmingham.
Yes?
You read about it?
In the papers. I don't tear out the articles. I wouldn't want them to think I was dwelling on anything morbid. You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
I thought you might have some ideas.
Why should I tell you?
You get to see the file on this case. And there's another reason.
Pray tell.
Thought you might be curious to see if you're smarter than the person I'm looking for.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you caught me.
No. I know that I'm not smarter than you.
Then how did you catch me, Will?
You had disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
You are very tan, Will. Your hands are rough. They don't look like cops' hands anymore. And that shaving lotion is something a child would select. It has a ship on the bottle, doesn't it? Don't think you can persuade me with appeals to my intellectual vanity.
I don't think I'll persuade you at all. You'll either do it or you won't. Besides, we have Dr. Bloom working on it, and he's the best.
Do you have the file with you?
Yes.
Pictures?
Yes.
Let me have them and I might consider it.
No.
Dream much, Will?
Goodbye, Dr. Lecter.
You haven't threatened to take away my books yet. Let me have the file and I'll tell you what I think.
So this is another great procedural crime thriller, and its Tooth Fairy character is very loosely inspired by a real killer, the BTK killer, and that's an acronym for Bind, Torture, Kill, and his name was Dennis Rader. So yes, once again, we have a real-life serial killer inspiring a fictional one.
Wow. And he was one of multiple serial killers featured in a series that you both ranked very high, and that is David Fincher's Mindhunter. Yazdi, why do you like this show?
Yeah, Jade, it's for the exact reason that you mentioned earlier, which is trying to get into the mind of these serial killers in an attempt to better maybe prevent them from doing more harm. So Mindhunter consists of 2 seasons, which were produced by David Fincher, and Fincher himself directed several of the episodes in both seasons. So the show is about the formation and work of the Behavioral Science Unit, or the BSU, the real-life department at the FBI, which was formed to better understand serial killers so we can do better at catching them. And in doing so, the show becomes a very thoughtful, systematic dive into almost every known serial killer that became a household name since the early 1970s. Many have called the show cold and methodical. Yes, it is both of those things, but I think only to its great credit. Mindhunter is the best kind of anomaly when it comes to shows about serial killers, of which there are a dime a dozen. And in Mindhunter, we seldom see much violence depicted on screen. And as a filmmaker, it would have been so much easier to give in to the sensationalism and have us actually see reenactments of the worst kind of crimes. Instead, the show relies on meticulously recreated interviews conducted with actual serial killers. And to see what they have to say about what they did and to hear it in their own words is far more disquieting, the kind that settles into your bones with a chill. And Mindhunter knows that what you can imagine in your head is far more disturbing than anything you're actually shown on screen. I also wanted to say that Mindhunter, in a way, is the logical extension of the film Zodiac that Fincher had directed a decade ago. That film, too, was about the tedious, tireless process that goes into trying to nab a serial killer. And it asks the question, can we truly understand the mind of the smartest serial killer? Or does evil simply exist as is with no explanation? So Mindhunter is full of very careful reenactments of FBI interviews, but it is also an exercise in masterful character development for each of the 3 principal cast members played by Jonathan Groff, Anna Torv, and Holt McCallany.
Wow. Beth, what do you love about the show? What does it get right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Yazdi said. This show is amazing, and David Fincher is so good at this kind of storytelling. And it tries to be very accurate, unlike there's the current Ryan Murphy Monster, the Ed Gein story, which goes into exactly what Yazdi said Fincher avoids, which is this sensationalizing of the case and the facts. So Fincher and his team pull a lot of the dialogue from actual interviews the FBI had with these serial killers. And what I love is that so much of the show is just those interviews. You're just in a room with a serial killer and these FBI agents. It's objectively a safe space. It's a prison, there are guards, there shouldn't be anything that causes them to feel danger. Yet these are some of the most chilling moments ever created on film or in a show. And the casting of the serial killers is all spot on. They look and sound like the real people that they're portraying. And as Yazdi mentioned, Fincher did this in Zodiac. And again, Zodiac is inspired by the real Zodiac killer, which also inspired the Dirty Harry film. And in that film also, the most tense scenes are just dialogue, and like the threat feels so palpable. So here's one of the many stunning interview scenes with serial killer Ed Kemper, who was known as the co-ed killer, and these scenes just send chills up my spine.
I'll be honest, I don't get many visitors. When I do, you think they want to talk about this. No, it's like if you worked at a slaughterhouse with livestock, real conversation stopper.
Did you?
No, I'm just saying people who hunt other people for a vocation, all we want to talk about is what it's like. Shit that went down, entire upness of it.
Right, sure.
It's not easy. Butchering people's hard work. Physically and mentally, I don't think people realize you need to vent. What are you writing down?
Oh, I just think it's an interesting choice of words. Vocation.
Well, what would you call it? A hobby? I'd say it's more than that. Look at the consequences. The stakes are very high.
So the fact that Mindhunter never got to complete its story arc is tragic. It did go a little off the rails towards the end, and the show is based on Mindhunter inside the FBI's elite serial crime unit, which was written by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. And the book tells the true story of FBI agents John Douglas and Robert Ressler, along with Ann Burgess, who was the inspiration for the Anna Torv character. And there's an excellent documentary on her called Mastermind to Think Like a Killer, and I highly recommend that. Burgess was a psychiatric clinical nurse, and she pioneered assessing and treating trauma in rape victims, and her work with victims really helped profiling these serial killers.
We kind of touched on this a little earlier, but why do you think we have this fascination, if you will, with serial killers? Why are so many films and series and documentaries focused on them? Yazdi?
I don't know. I'm not one of those.
Like, don't include me in the weeds. I hear you, Yazdi. I'm with you.
No, but I think at some level I understand this fascination of trying to understand the very absolute worst that humanity is capable of. And there has to be an inherent fascination with that.
Beth, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. It's wanting to know the darkest parts of humanity. Can I learn anything from these films? Does it help me to understand what prompts these people to do these things, or what could help me if I ever encountered any of them? You know, I would never say to a serial killer, you don't have to do this. I think we've learned by now they have no conscience. It doesn't do you any good. It only plays into what they want you to be, which is a victim and to have power over you. I did speak to a forensic psychologist who for 24 years was a consultant to the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI, and he worked with the people who inspired Mindhunter. And here's what J. Reed Malloy says about why we might be fascinated with these movies and these serial killers.
People flock to the theater in a safe place, to experience the fear of being prey to a predator. It can capture you emotionally to where you can experience that fear and explore that fear within yourself in the context of a safe environment. The experience of being prey to a predator is so primitive. This level of fear is buried deep in what's called the limbic system of our brain. That fear has kept us safe to be able to sense predation and be able to then do one of three things. Typically hide, fight, or flee. And then one emerges out of the theater or leaves the couch, and having had this experience of deep limbic arousal of fear, I think is an enormous draw.
Wow, and that is very, very fascinating. I've been speaking with our midday movie critics, KPBS Cinema Junkie, Beth Accomando, and Movie Wallace's podcaster, Yazdi Padavla. Beth, Yazdi, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for putting up with my request to do serial killers.
I'm sold on the films now. I am.
Thank you, Jade.
And before I wrap up, I just want to share a little more of what forensic psychologist J. Reed Malloy had to say. I wanted him to introduce a film at the Secret Morgue 7, slashers and serial killers, but his schedule is not going to make that possible. So I decided to tap him for this podcast and caught him as he was heading out of town. So I didn't have a proper sit-down interview, but I found a lot of what he had to say fascinating. In talking about Mindhunter and the FBI's stance prior to the creation of the Behavioral Science Unit, Malloy said the thinking was there was nothing to learn from criminals.
And then along came three people. I knew all three of these people as a very young consultant, as they did something that was extraordinary at the time, and that is that they approached their superiors at the FBI and said, we'd like to go talk to these individuals because we think we can learn a lot from them. In retrospect, it doesn't seem like much, but this was shocking at the time, that you would actually go talk to criminals. But they pressed, and out of that came the first behavioral science unit.
I asked him about Ann Burgess, the woman who inspired the character of Wendy Carr. Unlike her fictional counterpart, Burgess had been a nurse before coming to the FBI.
Yeah, so her perspective on these cases was quite important. One of the reasons was that over the course of their work, they would encounter victims that had survived some of these
events that were intended to be murders. And so a victimology began to develop in terms of these individuals, which at that time, particularly because the serial murders were mostly against women, is that these women could do several things. One is they could actually talk very specifically about the behavior of the perpetrator, as well as the histories of the victims. What are the various decisions that these women made that got them into a position where they were vulnerable to an individual that could carry out a serial homicide?
In addition to his duties with the FBI, Malloy was also retained as a forensic psychologist by the defense in criminal litigation.
And one of the things that struck me was how different each one was. You know, they didn't fit any caricature. These individuals were typically not necessarily very bright, cunning, shrewd, Hannibal Lecterian individuals. In fact, typically their life histories were abysmal in many respects, both the nature and the nurture, where there was oftentimes histories of neglect and abuse of these individuals. There were often major chronic failures in both relationships as well as any kind of occupational pursuits. And then at some point in time, they would decide to then assault. And with some of these individuals, actually, the first killing was accidental. Then what they realized was that they liked it. And what they found was the actual assault and then the killing was very sexually arousing to them. And this would then bring them back to this behavior weeks, if not months down the road with another victim, where it would be much more intentional and much more planned. And the killing would become a part of the modus operandi of the individual.
I explained to Malloy that my fascination with serial killers began with wanting to understand the darkest part of human behavior.
One of my initial motivations of getting into essentially criminal forensic psychology, which is where I worked for decades, was that I was always very, very curious about the extremes of human behavior. And I was never repulsed by it. I was never put off by it. I was just intensely curious about how people could do these certain things. And I think by immersing myself in that, it was a way to gain a much fuller understanding of this and probably to feel safer. Yeah, I totally get that.
Malloy does feel that there are fewer serial murder cases now in the United States because the forensics have become so good. But they do still occur, so he offers this advice since opportunism plays a major role in victim selection.
And I remember one individual that was a serial murderer, but I said, what keeps you from selecting a victim? And he said, lights, locks, and dogs.
That was forensic psychologist J. Reed Malloy with a final piece of advice. That wraps up another edition of KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie. If you enjoy the podcast, then please share it with a friend, because your recommendation is the best way to build an addicted audience. You can also help by leaving a review. Till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident Cinema Junkie.
KPBS has partnered with StoryCorps for the One Small Step program. We invite you to sign up to have a conversation with a person that may have different views, so you may talk, not about politics, but to understand each other better. Sign up at kpbs.org/onesmallstep.